Hello, you marvellous morning memories of magical midnight malt moments. That's a biggie. That is a big malt mention. And it's been provided by Mark Southwell. So thank you, Mark, and a big shout out to Mark's Whisky Club, because he's in a whisky club, which is a very useful thing to be attached to if you're a whisky fan. I'll explain that shortly. Where was I? Yeah, I'm Ralphie, in the bothy. I've just had a malt mention, and that means one thing. We're about to have a whisky review. And for this whisky review, number 986, we are going to Ireland. Ireland is a booming whisky destination. So, not that long ago, you had Bushmills, Jamesons, and a little bit of Tullamore Dew, and that, malt mates, was about it. That was about all your choice. And not a lot of choice, but at least you had an option. However, things are changing rapidly. Ireland is a very busy, economically diverse country. And one of the signs of that is the sheer number of distilleries that are opening up and finding their feet presenting what they produce to the wider world. And what Irish distilleries have to do is not just replicate what is coming out of Jamesons in the south or Bushmills in the north, which we're all pretty much familiar with, but to actually explore other aspects of Irish whiskiness. And I'm going to present this Dingle Samhain. I pronounce it Samhain because I pronounce things phonetically, because things should be phonetically pronounced for simplicity and communication. However, the real pronunciation of this is Samhain, and it's part of the Dingle Celtic series of 4 different bottlings, which are to do with basically the traditional Celtic stroke pagan stroke pre-Christian whatever references to the times of the years. So they tend to line up with the equinoxes, and the Samhain is to do with the equinox of the season from summer into autumn. So there we go. It kind of just gives you a little bit of point of reference. So let's pour some. Dina, a word of warning. Oh, I've already poured some. I started pouring some before I started the review. So there's no need to add any more to it. That's quite enough to be getting on with. So this is, I've chosen this one because it's a cask strength whisky. It's triple distilled. It's what you call a single malt, so it's not a traditional pot still whisky. And it spent most of its time in bourbon casks and been finished in a muscatel cask, which is fine if finish away. All you want, distillers, so long as your finishes are successful and properly done. And I think in this case, it has been properly done. I also want to add that this whisky has been bottled at cask strength, or roughly at cask strength, of 50.5%. I do suspect it's been brought down a little bit just to let the flavours come out and to suppress the youthful alcoholic nip of what is a relatively young whisky, which has been spending time maturing in fresh, wet casks. So you have this youthfulness here. You have quite a strong cask presence, particularly of the muscatel, and less of the oak in the casks. So I would put this whisky about 6, maybe 7 years old. And a word of caution, I have to add that despite the fact that it is natural colour and it is unchill filtered because it states on the label, this is quite expensive if you're in the UK, because you're looking at about £85 or £84 a bottle. So fine, £84 if it's a 12-year-old single malt, but I don't think this is anywhere near 12 years old. But the quality's there. I bought this one because, in my opinion, it's a better quality version of Dingle. Dingle, like so many other Irish distilleries, is still young, still gaining experience. And when I say gaining experience, what I really mean is that you know how to make whisky fairly early on in the life of a distillery, right? But it's fine-tuning that. It takes time to fine-tune the signature coming from the stills to prevent the authenticity and the originality that is backed by the distillery name. And I think that Dingle is one of the distilleries, along with West Cork, funnily enough, which is really establishing that, which isn't really relying on a generalised signature, fresh and fruity, with a whole load of exotic cask finishes coming out left, right and centre. The cask finish here is sort of exotic, but it's not completely dominating. The substance of the spirit shows through, particularly in the fact that it's bottled at cask strength. Now that's what appealed to me. I really want to be reviewing something for you as part of my World Whisky series, which is showcasing what the next few years of Irish whisky is going to bring in terms of flavour. So here we have it. Dingle do batch versions. So they have batch 1, batch 2, batch 3, batch 4, etc. They have a standard version which is actually quite accessibly priced and is mercifully bottled at 46+%. But this one is where they're kind of pushing the boat out a bit. They've invested more in this. And I think that's one reason why they're looking to justify the price they're asking. And I reckon it's best to pay more for a really good whisky than to pay a reasonable price for a very mediocre and forgettable whisky. Now that's my motivation for buying this. So what have we got on the nose? And this is, bear in mind, when people are looking at Irish whisky, they're looking at traditional pot still. They want these really green notes in their whisky, particularly from the UK and from Europe. They're looking for that style of whisky. But be warned, malt mates, the price of these whiskies for traditional pot still whiskies are really going up, just as some of the quality of the bottles is getting a little bit iffy because of the calibre of the casks being used. Just saying, just sharing. And I'm talking about some of the most prominent brands here. It's real life, it's business. The first thing I notice in this is a wonderful, rich, complex barley sugar note. The nose gives you a very good introduction to this version of Dingle. It is substantial and complex, and I'm talking about the actual spirit that's coming out the still itself. It is not trying to be clean and tidy and fresh and fruity. It is giving you the fullness of the sensation range within what's coming out the still, and this is very well presented in this particular bottling. As soon as you nose it, you notice that biscuit, cereal, savoury note, the slight linseed note, the slight umami note that's coming off, that really is a cereal-driven sensory experience. There are green notes, minty notes, and yet it's quite refined. And the reason for that is that this is a triple distilled whisky. And this is one reason why they can bottle it successfully younger, because when you triple distill a whisky in pot stills, you are refining it due to the volume of reflux in the process. So you're getting at least a third more reflux in your spirit than if you had distilled it in 2 pot stills. So you're using 3 pot stills, or perhaps 1 pot still 3 times. You know, you've got a number of options here. But with triple distillation, you can also add more energy into your final new make spirit, because you don't take any cuts from your first run. So there's no foreshorts removed and no feints removed from the actual first pass through the low wine of the first pot still. So this is, I think, what they've done. So they're taking a good old Irish tradition and they're basically reproducing it, in my opinion, very successfully. So even in the nose alone, before we get to the taste, we're off to a good start. For a high strength whisky, the first thing you notice is the nip of the alcohol is kind of balanced off with the substance of flavour that's coming out the stills at Dingle. But it's still kind of young, it's still quite nippy, without a doubt. It most definitely needs some water, but before I go there, I will mention that you immediately notice some wonderful savoury barley sugar notes. This, by the way, reminds me, even at this early stage, of a Glenlivet with a savoury side to its nature. That's what it reminds me of. So you've got this fresh fruit, autumnal fruit, apples and pears, and a little bit of apricot there, a little bit of sort of late variety peaches and cherries. Yeah, I know that you're going to say, oh, Ralphie, too much water, you're adding too much water. No, I'm not. I'm adding 2 teaspoonfuls, which is 10 millilitres. And this portion of whiskey, which is a 250 millilitre measure, it will take it. It needs it. You need to open up that whiskey, suppress the alcoholic nip, and let the flavours come out. And as they do, due to the weakness of the remaining alcohol, because it's just been diluted, you'll get the complexity of the flavour. It's in there. I've paid a premium for it, so let's let it out into the glass. So a little bit of gentle stroly-poly, because you know I hate the shaky shakies. No shaky shakies, and no snorting, by the way. You won't see me going, oh, fantastic, oh. I'm not making this up. I've seen people doing this at whiskey festivals, and it really, really gets on my nips. It really does. People going through the pantomime of nosing and tasting whiskey, when in fact they're consuming far too quick. So when you're at a whiskey festival, anywhere in the world, just slow everything down. Keep it just gentle. Be respectful to the spirit, and just give it time in the glass. You're not at a whiskey festival for a binge of alcohol. You're there at a whiskey festival for a binge of experience of quality. This is why you plan your whiskey festival visits with military precision. You find out what are the best whiskies there. You home in on them. Those are the ones you experience because they're likely ones you can afford and you're going to want to buy. I know, I'm kind of a little bit of a detour there away from the single malt, but you know, that's what happens in this channel when you're getting an opinion. It's just like any passing conversation in a pub. It'll go off in different directions. So let's get back to the whiskey now. The nose is becoming more cereal savoury, and it's becoming more assertive, and it's definitely barley cereal driven. It's really nice actually. It's got slight pickled ginger note, mixed spice, cardamom, little bit of green mint, not peppermint, apple mint. That's what it is. It's got a touch of fresh apple mint to it. And cherry stones. Taste. Having added water, significant amount of water, it's really, in suppressing the alcoholic nip, it's really lifting out the condensed, savoury nature of the still signature. And in my opinion, I will certainly continue to be looking at Dingle into the future, because this is very interesting indeed. We're now at a stage in time where the fashion for fresh, light and fruity is dwindling because too many distilleries are doing permutations of it. And the courageous distilleries are investing in real intense flavour, what you would call old school flavours, which carry more sourness. And there's a delightful deep sour note within this whisky. But it's balanced and it's measured and it's complex and it's wonderful. And with experience, we all start to increasingly gravitate towards these more complex, demanding whiskies, where not just the fact that you've got intense flavours, but you've got more intense sensations as well. So the sweet, salt, sour, savoury and bitter. Remove the sweet, because nobody really likes a super sweet whisky who's really into whisky and paying a premium for whisky, because it masks flavour. It's as simple as that. So you're left with this savoury, sour, bitter and sour, savoury, bitter, and I can't believe it, I've forgotten the last sensation one. You'll remind me anyway. Wait a minute. Sweet, salt, sour, bitter, savoury. Right. Salt, sour, bitter and savoury. Fine, I got there eventually. Salt, sour, bitter and savoury. And these present very nicely. All the sensations are present here and balanced off. They're assertive without being overwhelming. But it'll be interesting to see how this whisky continues to develop. I think with the quality of the make, it'll be great as a 10-year-old, even an 11-year-old. Maybe as a 12-year-old, if the cask influence is lighter. But then I think at 17, it's going to be an absolute banger of a whisky, in my opinion. Another taste. It's not peated. It's wonderfully soft, sweet ginger, like the jars of ginger that you get in syrup, which we all chew for when we have a rotten sore throat or getting over a cold. It's that sort of gingeriness. Very, very nice indeed. I'm going to add a drop more water and give you some final tasting notes before. So, third teaspoon. What am I playing at here? Am I drowning this whisky? Something I must highlight to you. I've added 3 spoonfuls of water, now that's 15 millilitres, and you're noticing, Ralphie, hey Ralphie, where's the Irish mist? Where is the Irish mist? Because it states in the bottle, on the label and on the bottle, it says unchill filtered. So shouldn't there be some of that wonderful southwest coast Atlantic Irish mist creeping through the amber nectar within this glass? I mean, that's a legitimate question, malt mates, and I shall answer it right here, right now, without any further delay. It's triple distilled. Double distilled, we can expect to see the mist. The presence of cask oils, barley oils, long chain proteins, fatty esters, all these wonderful flavour enhancing components. But here it's very much suppressed. In fact, it's almost missing, for a simple reason. Triple distillation refines to a certain extent. A triple distilled whisky in that third distillation undergoes a part filtration process, so that the final product isn't all milky and cloudy when you add some water to it, simply because of the additional turn through the still. It's to do with the reflux, the refinement. I'd tell you what, Dingle really don't want to refine this whisky any further. It's just absolutely fine as it is. In fact, it's commendable that it has the weight and substance of character, having been triple distilled. So they're clearly doing things the old school, old fashioned, cost intense, cost-intensive way, and I commend them for that, because that's how you build your reputation. And it starts to go towards justifying the premium that they're asking for when you buy this whiskey. There you go. Final taste. The additional mortar makes it a little bit sweeter. The arrival, gingery, apple, slightly baked apple. The development, the sour kicks in. The bitter develops. You start to get more sort of red fruit and stone complexity. The bitterness you get from the kernels of these stones, that slight arsenic, that bitter almond note. Yeah, sure, arsenic tastes of bitter almonds. But, you know, when you eat an apple seed, it won't do you any harm. And you'll get a slight bitter almond note. That is in fact a tiny, tiny and highly beneficial amount of arsenic. Because when poison is in tiny, tiny, tiny amounts, it becomes a medicine. Which is why we drink tiny, tiny amounts of whiskey for its medicinal purposes. So where's my Irish whiskey card? And it's a malt whiskey as well. So I better get this right. Here we are. What's my mark? This is still a young whiskey. And I commend its character. But I think it's got a way to go yet. But they're definitely on their way. Once you've added water and you get access to the complexity and substance of it, it's pretty good. So I'm giving this 82 out of 100 for a Irish whiskey. That's a whiskey with a Y, with an E, EY, not just Y. And it's a malt mark. It's a single malt. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you want to pop back again shortly, my extras is going to focus on just some really practical reasons why we add water to whiskey. And I'm going to explain why I add more than you probably think I should add. I just want to kind of go into a little bit of a deep dive in that. So please join me again for Ralphie Review 986 Extras, which is going to come along shortly. Bye-bye.